Yeah, so it's my honor to welcome you all on to this session of future of ports, terminals, and warehouses for the chemical sector in India. We all know the growth that the sector has witnessed and is likely to witness, which likely trade volume to double over the next decade and maybe sooner as well. What that does is brings a lot of opportunities, but as well as challenges that we also need to tackle, be it in creation of automated warehouses or linking our various assets digitally, the digitalization of the entire process, and so on and so forth. At the same time, the regulatory frameworks are also tightening. Our customers and our panelists would sort of be would second that our customers demand safer and greener supply chains more and more, which means that we also need to evolve with the times. Some of the policy initiatives, such as the PM Gati Shakti, the Maritime Vision of India, the National Logistics Policy, etc., are good steps in those directions. So here we have a good mix of panelists from across the value chain, right from manufacturers to end-to-end logistics provider, third-party logistics providers, and so on. So what we'll do is, over the next 45 minutes or so, we'll try to bring the most pertinent aspects of this sector, and particularly the logistics value chain, to the fore, and pick the brains of esteemed panelists here. With that, let me start with the first question. My first question is to Mr. Mahendra. Now, Mr. Mahendra, it's a very basic question around, with the fast growth of, at least the tariff situation notwithstanding, the fast growth of trade that we have seen, has our infrastructure kept pace with it? And going forward, more importantly, with the likelihood of growth that we see, how do you see the Indian infrastructure, especially on the ports terminal side, to cope up with it?
Good afternoon, everyone. So, Udeep, from a chemicals manufacturing perspective, and I think it's important for us to also know that we are talking about an industry which is really looking forward to a growth, which is maybe, as I understand, by next 15 years will touch $1 trillion US. And with that kind of size, it is also important that we have the infrastructure. And when we talk about the international trade, the infrastructure, which is mainly ports and terminals, also has to cope up with what the industry demands. I think for me, it's a mixed bag, where we have seen a lot of improvements. At the same time, it leaves with a lot of expectation and gaps. Maybe some examples which I have experienced personally with LANXESS have been very disappointing in some aspects, but at the same time, in last maybe 1 decade, I've also seen a lot of improvements, and you can also relate with the announcement of the Vadhavan port that we have recently seen. It's a big leap, and I think it is something very important from the point of view of a lot of things which are not ticked yes as the boxes. I have seen that the ports have limitations, and I would also see, and the earlier panel also talked about the compliance. I think we have seen a lot of gaps on the compliance topics. A few years back, we had one incident in the port of Navasheva, where one of the containers with hazardous material dropped from the hatch of the vessel. And with that leaking material, fortunately it was a semi-solid material, with that leaking material, it was kept just open in the port with no kind of information to the people that how it has to be handled. Nobody reached out to the customer that is asked for them. And this shows a lot of gap in the overall understanding of the intensity of what chemicals can bring. And I think that is one gap. Secondly, it is very important that we have good connectivity with the hinterland from the ports, which is, as of now, I think it's still in a very, very nascent stage. We do see a lot of ICDs, but then overall the connectivity directly with the port is still a challenge. We have seen that kind of challenge. On overall infrastructure development point of view, I think it's heartening to see a lot of new announcements by the government, but there are still gaps which needs to be filled in.
No, so very clearly you articulated both in terms of the quantity, which is the capacity of the ports and terminals, but also I could sense you're putting quite a bit of focus on the quality of of the infrastructure. So just building on that point, and next question to Vishal. From your vantage point, and because you've looked, you must you take care of the entire sort of the region for including China for your organization. How do you compare the quality of infrastructure vis-a-vis other countries that you deal with? And if you can throw in some first-hand experience anecdotes there, it will be useful to sort of compare and contrast. And it's more to less of a critique, but more to for us to understand where the work is required to move of the quality quotient.
Thank you, Udeep. A pretty interesting question here, and it's quite central to the evolving dynamics of chemical logistics within Asia. So, as my vantage point, overseeing the India, China, and Southeast Asia, of the operations part. So I would say there's a proper progress which is happening in all the region. However, the progress is, the speed is different, and the approach is distinct basically it varies from region to region. If I talk about India, so India had done a commendable stride recently with steady growth of the logistics market, chemical logistic market specifically, and targeting to grow at how much, $13 billion by 2033. That's the target we have. And doing good, so intentions are good. However, having said that, there are still the points that needs to be considered, or where we need to gear up is on the enforcement of the regulatory parts. Okay, so and the last mile safety, and the third I would say is the real-time visibility of the in this dynamic sector basically. So to have that. So on the contrary, if I say China is pretty matured in terms of regulatory parts, where they have their 15603/2022 standard is a recent one, which is effective from July 2023, is pretty strict has a pretty strict norms in terms of hazardous chemical handling. So which involves the detailed procedures of the stacking of the hazardous chemicals, which includes the emergency management and also the labor protection for that. So I would say China is more standardized and able to reinforce the things in a better way. Southeast Asia presents more of a mixed picture, whereas countries like Singapore and Malaysia, they had adopted ECTA guidelines of Europe and the international best practices for standardized or for containerized has cargo. Whereas the other region is still seeing those developments coming up in Southeast Asia. So if I summarize, so India is growing good, having a good intentions and a good growth investment. However, there are grounds to be covered in terms of the security and the real-time visibility of those. China leads with more standardized and enforcement policies there, And Southeast Asia is more diversified, which gives, in the pockets of where they have the excellent at certain pockets and still needs development in certain areas.
Understood. So that's sort of pretty clear. I mean, three things you mentioned: regulatory, last mile safety, and digital integration. And you elaborated on the regulatory part quite a bit. Let me just sort of build on that and ask the next question to Harsh, maybe, and then maybe I'll come back and do the round on this one. So Harsh, while as Vishal was saying, there are these regulations in India, at least, which are on paper at least there, right? Be it MSIHC or PESO or so on and so forth, right? But in the example that that Mahendra took, or I'm sure we all see on almost on a day-to-day basis, the violation of those regulations, etc., as well as non-enforcement of them, and that creating sort of in our customers' mind, in our supply chain partners' mind, a perception that is not amenable for our trade. So from your experience, what are the most urgent sort of safety and infrastructure investments that are required today to bridge this gap, right? Which let's say Vishal mentioned about between India and China, for example, and then how do and what role do players in the private sector play in those, and how do we balance the need for this investment versus also being cost competitive at the same time? I know it's an all-encompassing in a way.
No, it's not a problem at all. And this is something which is very, very important, the point that you've actually picked up. The first thing that we always tell people is there is something called as safety, and that will only come by training. If you do not even start training your people towards safety, and I'm not talking about the big companies who actually do it, but then there are service providers, whether they're trucking companies, they're logistics companies like ours, or warehousing companies. All these people who are giving these services or supplying services need to understand that training holds a very, very big part in safety. Our biggest problem is that we have never been taught safety. We were never scared of it. So until that does not come into our being, we will not be doing anything. So when we start looking at competition, the first thing that we do is we move safety away. So we compromise on safety. I'm sorry I'm being a little too frank and upfront in what I am saying. So the regulations that we have are there, but are they up to date? No, they're archaic. Even if there are regulations that are globally accepted, are we even being trained on that? No. So what exactly are we expecting when we discuss this, that, oh, how can we be more safer? We don't even go to a zebra crossing to cross the road. So I think what we need to do is set a reset before we start doing anything. So until there's no reset and we don't begin by accepting safety and not look at safety as being competitive, you cannot do that. Safety by itself is being competitive. One small mistake in your safety, one incident can take away all your profits for the next how many years, nobody knows. So let's look at it in a very different manner by understanding that unless we don't do these things, we don't train our people, and these trainings that are there happen on a regular basis. So every 2 years you need to be trained on maybe the IMDG code, and you need to be certified. So first of all, you can't even touch a document. You can't even make a document if you're not trained as per global requirement. Chapter 1, the first chapter in the IMDG code, or in any dangerous cargo training code, clearly says that anybody who deals with any kind of dangerous goods needs to be trained, whether it is documentation, handling the goods, packing the goods, securing them, any other thing. We are not doing that. So that is where it is. So we can't even think of how competition and how competitive we can be when we are looking at something. But yes, there are warehouses, there are places. I've put in a few points that I think that we need, and that would be, today what we are doing is the warehousing that we do, there is a possibility of cross-contamination. So what we need is dedicated, segregated warehousing or tankaging, if that is the case. Then modern spill containment systems, which don't exist in. Just now we just got to hear that in the port it's leaking and there was no spill containment system. And mind you, there is a spill containment system. It exists, but it does not. You can also look at the continuous gas detection, automated fire suppression systems. And you have to understand that it's the emergency, the response drills, the emergency response. You'll keep having drills for people to understand in case there is going to be an incident, what is the way to, take care of it. So maybe I'm showing the mirror to everybody or I don't know what, but yes, that is what I believe. And when you look at safety, I think safety, you cannot look at it as anything else. I would say look at safety in your business more like a risk mitigation enabler. If you can do that, you will see a huge difference. And people globally are asking for companies who work with them where people are trained. Safety holds a very big, it's one of the first things that you can even speak about. And there are globally people who are asking, companies who are asking for such kind of companies to service them. So I don't think we can compromise safety at any given time, at any given place, whether it is towards competitiveness or losing money, because the first thing is when you're doing safety, you are also ensuring that nothing happens. So your insurance value also comes down. Your claims value come down. So that is your competition, but it's a long-term thing. I hope I've been able to put in everything that you needed.
Yeah, no, and if I may ask a follow-up on that, I mean, you talked about you took the example of zebra crossing, etc. I mean, there's this big question mark on our civic sense collectively in the society. However, in this country, you would find, and let me take an example from nearby, let's say a Reliance Corporate Park in Ghansoli. You can't drive at more than 30 kilometers per hour inside that, and it's followed, largely.
Why?
So my question is, why? And then, are these, these islands, if I may call it, and I'm sure you do it in your organization, so on, cannot be created at some of the most critical infrastructure points and terminals of our country? And is it not time for us to act on those while we work on the broader civic sense and everything?
Maybe you're asking the question of him.
No, it's a follow-up to me only. Okay.
Feel free to add.
You want him to speak?
I'm asking to you,
Okay.
As a follow-up.
So, see, what is not possible? Everything can be created. It's not that it cannot be created. The point is implementation. Can we implement it? Now, if we don't even understand the dangers, it's a normal thing for a person to be scared of something if you understand the danger. We don't even know what happens when you see a truck moving, there is something dripping from that truck, there is maybe a skull mark or there is some acid written over it, some UN number written over it. Nobody even knows what it is. Why? Because the policeman on the road does not know what it is. He's not trained. The fire brigade, when it comes over there, does not know what it is because they are not trained. So it has to start from somewhere. And when you create something like this, there is always, though I am not a fan of fining people or telling people that you have to keep paying fines or, put into jail for not doing things, but until and unless there is no scare, nothing is going to happen. Today we wear seat belts. We are not wearing it for safety. We are only wearing it because the policeman is going to see us and is going to give us a fine. We are not wearing it with the true sense that it's actually for our safety. and only the front 2 seats are allowed, are supposedly safe if you put you put on your seat belt. If you sit behind, even if you don't put on your seat belt, it's fine. So there you go.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is it's broadly, it's a mindset that we need to tackle
So
first.
we have to
get
unlearn
things
what
moving.
we've learned to start learning what we should.
Yep, fair. Sir, did you want to add to this?
No, no.
Raju?
Next question.
Okay. Okay, so I mean, in the interest of time, just changing tact a bit here and talking a question pertaining to your experience and where you come from. So, Mr. Raju, we are increasingly seeing this, port, rail, 3PL sort of tie-ups, which, reduces dwell time, just helps the consumer, the clients that I serve, are increasingly relying more and more on such integrated services for their handling, because it's not their core business, for example, right? Why should they be dealing with all the hassles that comes with the inbound material, for example, for them? So in this context, how do you see such offerings that organization like yours are putting out there in making the entire supply chain much more transparent, in making this much more cost effective, and in general sort of easing the hassles that the consumers face?
See, over the period of time, Udeep, what we have seen is most of the big time companies, or what we call it as the professional companies, have started thinking in the format of integrated logistics. Now, what we mean by integrated logistics is you have your network of offices overseas, which will take care, if in case you're going to imports, if your customer wants certain imports to be done, they will source it, and they will even try and do the freighting part of it. What we call it as the MTO operators, the multimodal transport operators. And these days, the government is facilitating this type of a movement big way, big time. I mean, you have crores of investment going in from Government of India towards facilitating this multimodal transport system. And in this, you also you start your services for a 3PL logistics, a contract logistics, or warehousing system, what we call it. Now, many a times you have your freight forwarding division taking care of the movement of the goods, either through the shipping line directly, or doing the custom clearance at the foreign port and then moving it onto the port through the help of the shipping line, offloading it over here, let's say in our Shiva as an example, and then doing the custom clearance over there with your own office, because you have your own custom clearance division as well within the company, and then give a through booking on the MTO document, the CTO, what we call it as the combined transport document. Do the booking right up to, let's say, Indore, Pritampur ICDs, or can be Delhi, or can be even Lucknow, or any other place. And you, the customer who is interested in getting these imports, gets it at his doorstep. This is what the modern concept teaches us, door-to-door delivery concept. And this is now increasing. What it does basically is good but simple documentation through and through, legally vetted and signed off, but ensures that the customer doesn't have to do all the running around, arranging for the first mile, the last mile transportation, getting a custom clearing agent, on-time deliveries, ensuring that the container is placed from the ship onto the train, and from the train onto the trailer, and all these hassles are rolled out for him. So basically, what we really mean, and even at the destination, that is, let's say you're importing at Delhi, you don't need the goods right now. You can even store it in the warehouse, which means you're either sharing a warehouse with somebody, or you're taking space, or you yourself have a facility towards 3PL or contract logistics. You can provide space for them. Now comes the question whether, since we're all talking of chemicals, believe me, just 3 days back, I was going through some documents. We heard of a vessel called YN Mobility, which was carrying tertiary butyl peroxybenzonate. This was to be stored in reefer container, and it was one of those containers, a heavily hazardous chemical on board the ship was not connected to the plug, and it was being carried. The temperatures rose to about 40 degrees centigrade, and it gave way flames. The vessel has suffered huge damages because of such containers on board the ship. Questions can be asked, so many, but the accident has occurred. Where, who did the mistake, how it happened, those are the things which need to be checked. Another ship called Express Pearl, it sank off the Colombo coast carrying nitric acid leakages. Then a third ship, which happened just last week, Mary Maersk off the Liberia coast, is still on fire. The boats are still fighting the fire. It's been towed across to the West African posts just to ensure that, to study and then find out what are the amount of damages. Now the question is, we all have talked in previous sessions as well, this session as well, that we need training, we need people to be trained, we need people to be, going across the documents, etc., etc., etc. Where did it all start? Did it not start in Europe? Did it not start in US? Were they not the first perpetrators of all this? Have they not taken the risk? Have they not taught the people how to go about reading all this, understanding all this, practicing all this? Because when I used to work in Nava Shiva as a vessel planner, I remember we were told time and again, recheck time and again. But there is always element of misdeclaration and also misquoting the weights of the container, misquoting the hazardous class of the MSDS, not interpreting the MSDS properly. Now, who is going to take care of all these things, whether they are followed to the T, to the alphabet, and whether what has been declared is correct or not? Even today, the customs declaration for a hazardous cargo differs from a port definition of a hazardous cargo. Even today, the pollution control authorities have many misgivings about who is to take the license for storage of hazardous class 1, 2, 3, etc. They have misgivings. There is a lot of misunderstanding. As recent as a case like last month, we were still arguing with the license giving authorities whether you need on-roof sprinklers, whether you need in-rack sprinklers for hazardous cargo, so on and so forth. Factory Act being applicable, if the warehouse is inside the factory, if it's outside the factory, you need more stringent conditions. Why have all these problems? Have a simple, straight law for everybody and ensure that while I put the law, I also put in a condition that every single person has to undergo an exam and learn and then qualify for these. Made sail on the ship in a container stuffing, made store inside a warehouse. Even while custom clearance, you have to be extremely vigilant about what he declares to the customs, what he declares to the port, what documents does he file with the CDO in the port or with the customs, so on and so forth. So this is where we are lacking, and that is why we face so many accidents happening. We had cases of Bhiwandi warehouses with storing hazardous cargo being burnt, reduced to ashes. I can quote so many cases like this because we have come across all of them. So this is where, gentlemen, we feel that we all are responsible and to try and save all this and then proceed towards a safe environment. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Raju. That's clearly a very passionate take on a lot of, on a very important subject that we all need to pay heed to. Mr. Mahendra, on similar lines, we see a lot of this cargo, which is, and I'm talking about inland transportation, ends up on the roads, right? And which is also partly because of the lack of proper infrastructure around alternate modes of transport, lack of multimodal and so on and so forth, right? So in this regard, what is your take in terms of how we have progressed and where we are going? Are we doing enough? And is there room to sort of push on this aspect?
Yeah. So if you see, even today, while we are talking about a lot of multimodal transportation modes available, around 70% or even more is still by road. It is still moving by road. And we are talking about all the chemicals, including the hazardous chemicals. And here, I would say there is a lot of intent which is required from the regulators. I have a very recent example, and Shankar has just left, but we have been working with the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas for 7 years to get the permission for ISO tanks to be able to carry Class A, B petroleum products. It took 7 years for them to come out with a notification, which is an amendment to the PESO rules of the movement by road. And even after that much of follow-up, it is something which you cannot practically implement. So then when they are saying that it is a ISO tank which you are approving for movement by road and rail, they will say that, okay, you will have to have maybe the baffle plates in between. They are making things which are more practically difficult for people to implement. So there you need an intent from the regulators to make it simple, because unless you incentivize the movement of the hazardous cargo by rail or coastal even, you will not see the companies really coming forward. Because see, the like-minded companies, like maybe few multinational companies who wants to make their cargo safer, will still try to do something out of it. But then we are talking about so many companies, 40,000 around chemical companies. How will you really push them to use the multimodal transport to make it more safer? And this is completely different from the ESG topic which comes into play, because obviously when it is a rail or coastal, we are talking also about the sustainability topic. But here it is more to make things safer, and that safety is always at the risk when the road transportation is taken. I think we have a lot of regulators to be pushed for this, and then that is something which comes from an intent. Secondly, also on the coastal topic, I think an excellent option, but then it is still having a lot of ambiguity in really having a complete transparency of where it is moving. We are talking about only one part of Indian western coast, which as of today is being served by a coastal movement. There also we are talking about lack of traceability, which is as of now a big concern. We are also talking about still having more transit time than your road. So why a company will really move into coastal if his customer is shouting that my material is urgent, and then you are trying to say that, okay, I will go with coastal. So there are a lot of challenges that we still face. And unless you really push and make it more streamlined, make it more, so when we talk about digitalization of this topic, the National Logistics Policy talks about it, but then what is the ground reality of the implementation? How it has really moved into the day-to-day life of the chemical companies? I mean, to be honest, we have not really been able to implement it because there are lots of gaps that we see, and that is still pushing my efficiency back when I'm delivering the material to the customer. So I think it's a lot to do on that front from the government side, because unless you really make people, make it attractive for the companies, it will not really give you the results that you expect.
Just to continue on that part,
Sure, please.
Add it here. My experience here is, there's a lot of intention is there. That we have a strong intention of doing the things, but we are failing actually at the execution level. So this is what I believe that's what's happening here in India. So intention is there. There are a lot of schemes which are coming up, but execution at the right way, at the right level, which is where we are falling behind.
Please, we mentioned about the tank containers just now, and how, we have to go to peso to get things done if you want to carry any petroleum products. The best part is that the tank that comes in is not manufactured in India. It has been approved for carriage of this cargo on a global basis. That means it can take all kinds of multimodal transportation. But when it comes to India, it has no approval at all. So why is it that something that is approved globally by every country, that a country like ours suddenly decides that, no, you can't do it? And how can you make something that is already approved better when you don't even have the testing facilities to make it better or prove it better? So there is a lot of things that need to be understood when these regulations are made, because someone sitting over there maybe does not know this equipment. And instead of taking help from international bodies who are associations who are willing to do this kind of thing, and even bigger companies who are willing to put forth their expertise. But the questions, if you ever read that questionnaire or the application form for it's unbelievable. It's not possible because those things that they ask don't exist. So there you go.
Yeah. No, I mean, and this probably is an open question before I move to the set line of questioning. What if, let's say, tomorrow government were to enforce some of these things, and that puts a cost pressure on our supply chains, right? And questions to manufacturers, logistics service providers, who's going to bear that cost? And how, in this world of tariffs and so on, where we are, clamoring for every inch of competitiveness, what we can get, structural disadvantages and so on and so forth. Because that's the question sort of our clients face as well. While we can sit here and talk about non-enforcement and so on, I completely agree with most of the points. But how do we deal with the cost competitiveness part of it?
See,
or is there a way to, I sense some, is there a different way to look at it?
See, I'll just mention one point. Often this comes in with the service providers when we approach the MNCs or the big organizations for providing logistics services to them. Let's take an example of a warehouse for chemical storage. You have both options available. You can keep it on the ground, you can keep it on the racked facility, right? Now, when you put in your racks with an investment, there is X cost, which is always higher than what you're going to put it on the ground, per se, for the first year when you talk to the industry or the customer. Then there are safety elements like the sprinklers, like the safety alarms, like the face washers, like the underground pit, storage pit, contamination water pit, so on and so forth. All this does involve an X investment, and which is not going to end up paying lakhs. It might even go into crores. And then more the height of the roof, more higher is the racking, which means special equipments for handling them, which is even more costly. Now, when you present your proposal to the customers, the first reaction is, no, I don't think we can pay so much. On top of it, when one of my fellow panelists talked about digitization, you end up getting a WMS for him. You try and start implementing that. That is going to cost you X amount of money as well. So all these investments put together, on one hand you say, I want one of the best warehouses, very well technically advanced, very safe, etc., 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 all the superlatives. But on the other hand, you want it at a real low cost. Is this possible? This is where both the parties, probably the service provider and the customer, as it often happens, we sit together, We try to move around and find out what is absolutely essential, what is not. There are certain companies which are willing to travel a mile, investing into these just because they want to fulfill the safety aspects. They are willing to invest into it. But there are certain other companies who say, let's cut corners. Maybe they won't go in for all the high safety equipments, they will have only the most essential ones. But here again, there's another catch. You go for a PESO license, or you go for a fire NOC, or any other licenses, there is quite a significant amount of money which needs to be invested, both off and on, right? So who is going to get into all this? And at the end of the day, your margin is what? Your margin is hardly 8%, 7%, etc. And when you sit around to calculate the margins as well, element A, please take it out. Element B, please take it out. Element C, take it out. So what is your margin? So it's a question of understanding. It's a question of following all what appears on the paper is not all hunky-dory. There are so many things that keep happening. We talked about the technical know-how. We talked about advancement, etc., etc. So are we going in the right way? Is the government really understanding all these issues? Same thing applies with even the transporters, even with the transport companies, the tanks, etc., etc. So what I would suggest is we still have miles to go, miles to travel before we can really say that, yes, we are following all this.
Well, I have a different take on this. If there is a norm that exists, then the competition also becomes the same way. So if there is a norm that says that everybody has to have this, like you have a car and you say, okay, it has to be Bharat, engine has to be Bharat 7. You can't drive it if it is, whatever 5 or 4 or Bharat 4 or whatever grade that is there. There is a norm. And once that norm comes in, then everybody starts implementing it. Once everybody starts implementing it, I'm sure we can all work on it to see where you come. So competition, it's like this. If you're looking at competition in a different manner, like if I'm quoting a freight of say $1,000 for carriage of a certain dangerous goods, and you come back to me and you say, no, I think I want $975. You are too expensive. Then it's not competition. That is just because somebody wants to reduce what is 20,000 or 25,000 kilos of cargo that is going in a container, and what is $25 against that? It's nothing. But the point that, oh, I am multiplying it, the multiplication factor comes in. I am doing 200 containers a month, so if I multiply 25 by 200, I make $5,000 is what I save. Do you actually save? There is going to be a compromise somewhere. So you see, it's always, from my point of view, it's also a thought process. So if your thought process leads you towards safety and there is a norm, you will accept it and everyone will work. How does it happen that in the developed, so-called developed countries today, that everything from safety factors and all that exists and people are all implementing it and people are paying the cost, the warehousing and everything? They are doing it. It's not that it's not happening. And us being competitive, does competition in safety, does it mean being cheaper or does it mean compromise? There are two different things that you have to look at. So that's my take on it.
Yeah. No, fair enough. You want to add to it or? Yeah.
You asked about who is going to really pay for this, right? The cost competitiveness. I think safety and compliance for a chemical industry should become the way of life everywhere. Because unless you do that, because we are also talking about the responsibilities towards the people around, and also as the chemical industry, we have a lot of responsibility as such. With that, if the safety and compliance, and if you're saying that government comes with some additional, maybe some kind of regulations in future, I think if it is a mandate, you have to follow it. And if there is a cost to it, which obviously there will be a cost to it, then you have to include that in your overall costing, not to pass on to the customer for sure, I'm not saying that. But then this has to be understood that yes, this is the cost that I will have to have for my manufacturing. I mean, even CMVR, as of today, the Central Motor Vehicle Rules, even if you follow that, there will be still a lot of cost which will come to the transporters. And then they will want that companies should pay for it, which if the company really cares for that safety and compliance topics, will pay for it.
Yeah. Oh, fair enough. Just moving on, Vishal, the question to you is, you handle a lot of these downstream chemicals, and a topic that is very close to my heart as well. We have, I mean, since, and just a bit of a context, we have a lot of petrochemicals investments these days, refineries looking at oil peak, trying to sort of go downstream. We have this new petrochemical complex coming up in Rajasthan, in Badmer, one in Bina, and another one planned down in AP, and so on. But all the building blocks like ethylene, propylene, etc., get tied up in these big bulk polymers, which is polyethylene and so on and so forth. And very little is left for downstream niche chemicals, if I may call it, or intermediates like EO, PO, and then downstream of those, be it glycols or polyols and whatnot, right? In that, and hence what we end up doing is either importing a lot of these downstream chemicals, the final products, which is polyols, etc., or the intermediates, which pose, especially EOPO, pose their own set of difficulties to kind of get, and so on and so forth. How do you look at the infrastructure development, and particularly the import-export infrastructure development, as a way and means to sort of cater to or diminish some of the, or reduce the dependence on imports for at least the downstream chemicals? So what I'm asking is, is there more port infrastructure, etc., required for importing more of the building blocks and intermediates, which will help downstream industries to sort of flourish?
So Udeep, you took up a very technical questions here. So look, if you're talking about the building blocks, ethylene and propylene side of chemicals, so which I don't think we are producing in India, and we are actually import dependent on for these products. Okay, and looking for long term, yes, the long term goal should be that we should start producing it in India, but that should be long term. But the mid-term and short-term should be like, with the help of logistics, how we can bridge this gap coming in. So getting ethylene and propylene and converting to the downstream EO, ethylene oxide, propylene oxide, which is an essential products for both for your pharmaceutical industry, for agro industry, and for your personal care. So those things where, I think the logistics and the current infrastructure should help us out in easing out the availability part here. And I'm sure with a lot of projects which are coming up, like the Sagarmala, where they are talking about connecting 279 ports together, which will give the access to improve the access and also the improve the turnaround time for those products. That will help us out. Also, dedicating the chemical berths at the port and having the deep draft ports will help us out, because the vessels that comes in here are like, are the big vessels which carry these. So that needs actually the deep draft ports to that. And having those type of infrastructure will actually help us out to get more and more of this thing, and not limiting to particular ports, can be brought to the different ports as well, and from where the distribution can happen. Coming to distribution, then again, if I talk about the PM's Gati Shakti project, where they are talking about integrating the road, rail, and the pipeline. So that will help us also help us to access these products in a more secure and safe way, because these are highly hazardous products. So that will help us out in doing these things. So in short, I would say that, you know, going for the production of these products is a long-term strategy, whereas the short-term and the mid-term should be, relying on improving our infrastructure so that we can have the ease of access of these products.
Yep, no, absolutely. I think make a fair point. And in the because in the short term we'll need to. There are also technology challenges with some of these downstream products, and those things also need to be solved. I'm also cognizant of time, so what we'll do is maybe open it up to the audience if all the panelists are okay. And if there are any questions, we'll take one or two questions from the audience. Yep, seems like we don't have any questions. So, well, I'll just.
I'll just get one point forward. You know, you said how do we start implementing, regulations and that they are not fined. So something that just comes to my mind is that if all of us, that includes all the service providers, the manufacturers, the warehousing companies, the ports, all they need to do is to understand that if someone is carrying dangerous cargo, if you keep two things, that the driver who's driving it is certified and everything is well labeled that is coming into the port or coming into the factory, and what is going out, you start by making sure that every driver who comes in, to start with, see, your factory where you manufacture is your fortress, so everything is tight over there, your regulations, rules, everything. Whatever happens, happens outside. So if you need a cargo, some kind of dangerous goods that's moving out, make sure that even if the driver is certified, he is given that 10-minute training on your cargo. In case of emergency, what do you do? If this happens, whom do you call? What do you have to do? Things that they need to understand. So, this is how it's going to start implementing, because if you're going to teach him, he's going to teach somebody else. And that's how it's going to move forward. When it comes to us, even when you are asking a service provider who's a freight forwarder or a shipping line, ask them, are your people trained in IMDG? Do you have a certificate? And you're supposed to ask. Ask. And if you see it, at least you know that someone who's handling your documentation knows what they're doing. Someone who's doing the operations knows what they're doing. So it has to begin with us. I cannot say that, why the government is not doing it, or why are we not doing it? Why shouldn't we start it? Let's do that. Let's pledge over here and say, okay, I will start doing this from today. And I say, yes, I will start doing it from today. Let everybody else start doing it.
Yep.
Let's stop at a positive note. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. And no, I think we all would agree that we need to make headroom and we need to make progress on this aspect. And it is absolutely critical to support the growth that we are. It's all ultimately it's all about growth and business and so on. So with that we can probably conclude here.